wonderful toys.
What's up, fellow spell slingers? It's Blue here from Blue Bears Games, and for this video I will be unboxing the first of the 5 March at the Machine Commander precons called Tinker Time. This precon is green, blue, and red, also known as Timur, and suggests using Gimbal Gremlin Prodigy as the main commander. First, let me tell you what Gimbal does before I tell you about the unique feature that's included in all of the March of the Machine Commander precons. Gimbal is 5 mana to cast for a 4/4 legendary Gremlin Artificer with 2 abilities. One of them is quite unique and seems to be the basis for how they put this deck together. The first ability is that it gives all artifact creatures you control Trample. The second ability states that at the beginning of your end step, create a 0/0 red Gremlin artifact creature token and put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of differently named artifact tokens that you control. I personally am a huge fan of token-themed decks, and Gimbal looks like it takes a slightly different approach to that theme, so I may like this one a lot. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself though, because all of the March of the Machine precons also have a unique thing about them that's different from all previously released Wizards of the Coast precons. They all include oversized plane chase cards and lightly used plane chase mechanics in the precons themselves. Plane Chase is a unique mechanic that changes entirely how the game is played, and while I personally don't enjoy or use this mechanic, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give it a try and see how you feel about it. I just don't have enough time as it is to play as much as I'd like, so unless someone specifically asks me to play this way, I'd rather just play Commander normally. Right now, I don't have enough time to explain all of the rules for the Plane Chase mechanic, but I will put a link to the rules on the Wizards of the Coast website, so you can check them out if you want to after you're done watching this video. Now, before I rip this bad boy open, I want to take a moment to let you know that if you're in the market for a new, awesome-looking deck box, playmat, or sleeves, please visit our sponsor at www.arcane-fortress.com and take a look at what they have. The deck boxes are some of the best I've ever used, and you can even get an additional 5% off of your purchase if you use discount code BLUEBEAR at checkout. So with all of that out of the way, it's time to finally get to it and show you just what's in the box. So before I actually go ahead and open up the box, I wanted to point out that this box is actually oriented very differently. Instead of being a tall box, this one's a wide box, and the reason for that is because it has some extra additional stuff in it compared to all the other ones. So let's rip it open and see specifically what all the differences are and go from there. So very differently configured, and I'm very disappointed in what I'm seeing so far. I'm not happy with the fact that they removed the bigger dividers. So these are the smaller ones, which I have no idea what to do with. So that's disappointing, and they gave you 3 this time. They still have the counters on them, so that's nice, but, I mean, what am I going to do with these? Anybody figure that out yet? I don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to use those for. Not only that, but when you go to pull the box out that the deck is supposed to go in, it's actually a little harder now. So, let's go ahead and look at everything. So, those are the Plane Chase cards, so I'll look at them in a minute. Here's the deck. They gave you a die because they have a planar die included. They do have a different set of cards in here. That's what these are. And that. So, these are Plane Chase cards. If you haven't played Plane Chase, it's actually not that bad of an idea. It's kind of fun. It adds a little different depth to the game. Obviously, we have a sample pack, which I'll open in a couple minutes or a couple seconds, whatever. We got the box that it comes in. One of the things I am happy to see is it looks like the request has been answered. We're back to the better boxes that are tall instead of oriented horizontally. These are the vertical ones. So this is what the box looks like for this one. It's not bad. I'm really happy to see the return of that. We have the neutral life counters, which are just black with the Planeswalker symbol. That's nice. We have the insert, which obviously doesn't have much in it as far as any value, but it still tells you a little bit about the special rules of Commander. And then, of course, it tells you a little bit about the deck. So, I mean, at least it has the additional rules for Commander, so that's nice that they added that back in. So, Plane Chase cards. I'm not going to go over all the Plane Chase cards because there are 10 here, but I will open up the pack and show you what they look like. And then if you want to pause the video at any time, you can read them for yourself. So the first one is Plane-Wide Disaster, Glimmervoid Basin, and here's what it is that you can roll the planar die to do an effect, and then it has a static effect as well, each of them. Selesnya Loft Gardens. I don't think any of these have monetary value, but they look like they have a lot of fun value. Isle of Vesuva, Stronghold Furnace, The Wilds, oops, skipped one, Garapur, so that must be in Kaladesh, The Western Cloud, 10 Wizards Mountain, and then New Archive. So those are the 10 plane chase cards for this one. And again, if you want to read them completely, go ahead and pause the video during each one. But I have no time to read them. I will be moving on. So let me zoom in just a little bit so I can open this up. This is a March of the Machine Collector's Booster Sample Pack. So let's go ahead and open that and see if we get anything good. I've told you before, I never get anything good out of these. Anybody who has good on you, I have never. So let's see what we get. All right. So we get an Emery, Lurker of the Lock, and then an Emote, Celebrated Bounty. So again, Emery's good. I will use Emery, probably make a deck out of her and sell it on my budget deck stuff, but other than that, nothing too spectacular as always. Now, we're here for the deck, so let me go ahead and open it up and show you all the cards. And then tomorrow I will do an upgrade guide for it. Alright. Split it in half, make it easier to handle. And then zoom in a little bit more so you can see the cards. Alright, so I already read off to you what Gimbal does, so we can skip that one and we can move on to the next. The other suggested commander here is called Rajmi and Ragavan. 4 to cast for a 2/4 legendary elf monkey that says, whenever you cast your first spell during each of your turns, exile the top card of target opponent's library and create a treasure token. Then, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost if it's a spell with mana value less than the number of artifacts that you control, and if you don't cast it this way, you may cast it this turn. Okay. Interesting. A lot of words there. So let's go ahead and see the rest of the deck now. Start off with the command tower. They always put one of them in. A crack open, a 3 to cast sorcery. This says destroy target artifact or enchantment, and you create a treasure token. So we're going heavy treasure tokens here. Evolving Wilds for mana fixing. Fractured Power Stone, because we actually can roll the planar die and make sense in this deck. It's actually one of the better mana rocks if you don't even look at the planar die ability. But it's a 2 to cast mana rock that comes into play untapped, and you can tap it to add a colorless, so that's good. But you can also tap it to roll the planar die and activate that as a sorcery. Gruul's Signet. It's 2 to cast, pay 1, tap it, and filter red and green. The Izzet Signet is for the blue-white. Path of Ancestry, good for tribal-style decks, or typo, whichever way you want. Reversed Engineer is a 5 to cast sorcery with Improvise. Improvise says that your artifacts can help cast this spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 generic, and then you can draw 3 cards. Root Out, more artifact and enchantment destruction. This one lets you investigate for 3. Simic Growth Chamber is the bounce land for the blue-green. Here's the blue-green Signet. Terramorphic Expanse, more mana fixing. Thoughtcast, it's 5 to cast, has affinity for artifacts, which is that for each artifact you have in play, it actually reduces the cost of this by 1 generic mana, and then it lets you draw 2 cards. Replicating Ring is a 3 to cast snow artifact that taps to add a mana of any color, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a night counter on Replicating Ring, and then if there are 8 or more night counters on it, remove all of them, and create 8 colorless snow artifact tokens named Replicated Ring, with the ability of tapping to add a mana of any color. I've used this in one of my decks before. Arcane Signet, again, it goes in every precon. Combine Chrysalis, it's a 2 to cast artifact, because all creature tokens you control flying. And then you can pay 2 generic, a blue, and a green, and tap it, and sacrifice a token to create a 4/4 green beast creature token, and only activate that as a sorcery. Curse of Opulence, it's 1 to cast artifact, it's a curse, so you choose a player. And then whenever the enchanted player is attacked, you create a gold token, and then each opponent attacking that player does the same. So it helps to create what used to be treasure tokens. They were called gold tokens in the beginning. Frontier Bouviac is the non-triome tri-land for this color combination. It enters tapped, but it doesn't cycle, and it works for 3 colors. Garroper Aether Grid is a 30 cast enchantment. You tap 2 untapped artifacts that you control to have it deal 1 damage to any target. So when you have a mass amount of artifacts, it can deal a mass amount of damage. Junk Winder is a 7 to cast 5/6 serpent that has affinity for tokens. So each token that you have in play reduces the cost of this by 1. And it says whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control, you tap target non-land permanent and opponent controls, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. It's a nice little lockdown for token making. Myriad Landscape, it's a quasi-fetch land. It's not a true one. It comes into play tapped. It taps that colorless, and then you can pay 2 and tap it to sacrifice it to go search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Reality Shift, it's good for removal actually. It's 2 to cast, it's an instant for blue that exiles a creature, and then its controller manifests the top card of their library. Manifesting means they take the top card, put it face down in front of them, and it's a 2/2 creature. Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, that's actually a good planeswalker, even though it doesn't have a ability to uptick. So it's either 2 blue, 2 red, or 1 blue, 1 red, and then 1 generic. Comes into play with 5 loyalty counters. Has a static ability that says, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. And then the only ability it has after that is that you can take 2 loyalty counters off of it to have target artifact that you control become a copy of another artifact that you control, or a creature you control until end of turn, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So I don't really use this card for the loyalty ability. I like the fact that it makes a lot of tokens. Soul Ring in every precon. Struggle and Survive, so it starts off as a 3 to cast instant in your hand that deals damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control, and then when it's in your graveyard, you can Aftermath it, and it says for 2 green and 1s, 2 total mana value. As a sorcery, you can have each player shuffle their graveyard into the library. So that's what that does. That's how that works, by the way. If you don't know what these kind of cards are, the first part is only be able to cast from your hand or from your library, depending on if you're cascading. And Aftermath is only able to be done from the graveyard. So that's how that works. Tireless Provisioner is a 3 to cast 3/2. This is a actually really good card. It's an Elf Scout that has a landfall ability that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can create a food token or a treasure token. I've actually used this on Arena for a lot of different reasons. This card is really good. Vampire's Vengeance, 3 to cast instant. It says Vampire's Vengeance deals 2 damage to each non-vampire creature, and then you create a blood token. So I don't see a lot of vampires in here, but I mean, at least it deals damage to a lot of things. Weirding Wood is a 3 to cast aura that enchants a land. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate, and then it says enchanted land has, you can tap that land to add 2 mana of any one color. So you can tap to add 2 green if you want, 2 red, it has to be the same color. Schema Thief is a 4 to cast 3/3 with flying. It is a Vidalcan Rogue Artificer. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a token that's a copy of target artifact that player controls. Sandstep War Riders is a 4 to cast 4/4 Trampler. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you bolster X, where X is the number of differently named artifact tokens you control. So blood token, treasure token, clue token, creature tokens, you know, all with different names. And then bolster just means that you choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures that you control and put X +1/+1 counters on it for this bolster. Cutthroat Negotiator is 4 to cast for a 4/3 Orc Pirate. Has Parlay, and its Parlay ability says whenever it attacks, each player reveals the top card of their library, and for each non-land card revealed this way, you create a tapped treasure token, then each player draws a card. Alright, Hedron Detonator is a 3 to cast 2/3 Goblin Artificer. It says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. That's not bad, actually. And it says you can tap it and sacrifice 2 artifacts to exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn, but only for that turn. So use that wisely. Ichor Elixir is a 4 to cast artifact that says if you would roll 1 or more planar dice, instead roll that many planar dice +1 and ignore 1. And it taps to add 2 colorless. So this is definitely a plane chase style of card, so on the upgrade guide I'm going to probably take that out because not a lot of people play plane chase. Path of the Animist is a 4 to cast sorcery that says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. And then it has a second ability that says Will of the Planeswalkers. It says starting with you, each player votes for either Planeswalk or Chaos. And if Planeswalk gets more votes, Planeswalk. If Chaos gets more votes, or the vote becomes tied, Chaos ensues. And I will have the rules for what Chaos ensues is up here so you can see what that is. Pain Distributor is a 3 to cast 2/3 Devil Citizen with Menace, and whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, they create a treasure token. Good for you, but also good for your opponents. And then whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, Pain Distributor deals 1 damage to that player, so then whenever they use those treasure tokens, it hurts. So I like that one a lot. Dance with Calamity is 8 to cast for a sorcery that says shuffle your library as many times as you choose, and you may exile the top card of your library. If the total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less, you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. It's actually pretty cool. I like it. There's ways to abuse that, I'm sure. Pia and Kieran Nalar is a 4-cast 2/2 legendary human artificer. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 color Stopter artifact creature tokens with flying. And then an ability that says for 3 and sacrificing an artifact, Pia and Kieran Nalar deals 2 damage to any target. Keldon of the Third Path is a 3-cast 2/3, has an ability for 3, and tapping it, you can create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, and you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So it's a nice token creator for 1 shot. Chaos Warp is removal. It's 3-cast instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library, and if it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. If it's not, nothing else happens. Stroke of Genius, good old Tolarian Academy decks love this card. Stroke of Genius, it's actually one of my favorite cards. 1 blue, 2 of any, and X. It's an instant that says target player draws X cards. Anybody who remembers the Tolarian Academy decks or doesn't know what that deck was, oh god, I will talk about that all day. Love this card because of that deck. Academy Manufacturer, one of the better cards probably in this deck. It's a 30-cast 1/3 assembly worker that if you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create one of each. This card can create a lot of tokens very quickly. It's not limited by that caveat that it can only happen once a turn. It's every time you do, and that's a really good card. Aid from the Cal is a 5-cast enchantment, has Revolt. So at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent that you controlled left the battlefield this turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, you may put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you may put it on the bottom of your library. So anytime that you have something die at the beginning of your end step, you can replace it with the top card if it's a permanent. That's a good card too. Bloodforged Battle Axe is a 1-cast equipment. The equipped creature will get +2/+0, and whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe. So that's another differently named token. It equips for 2 as well. It's not a bad card, actually. Brass's Bounty is 7-cast for a sorcery that says for each land that you control, you just simply create a treasure token. Nothing too spectacular there, it's just a lot of treasure tokens later in the game. Cinderglade, a basic budget dual land, has both land types. Echo Storm is a 5-cast sorcery. It says when you cast this spell, copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game, and you may choose new targets for the copies, and it lets you create a token that's a copy of target artifact. Not bad for this deck. Everquill Phoenix is a 4-cast 4/4. It's a Phoenix, so we know it's going to come back in some way. It has Mutate. Its Mutate cost is 1 red and 3 of any. And then it has Flying, and whenever this creature mutates, create a red artifact token named Feather with pay 1 and sacrifice Feather to return target Phoenix card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Exotic Orchard, another budget dual land of some sort. I mean, it's not really a dual land, it's a mana fixing land. Fiery Confluence is a 4-cast sorcery that says you can choose 3 modes, and you may choose the same mode more than once. So you can choose to have it deal 1 damage to each creature, 2 damage to each opponent, or destroy target artifact, and you can choose any way you want to use them. You don't have to choose to destroy an artifact. You can choose to deal 2 damage to each opponent twice if you want. Frostboil Snarl, it's another budget land. It actually enters the battlefield tapped unless you reveal an island or a mountain from your hand when you play it. So, I mean, it can come into play untapped. Next half of the deck, Game Trail, another budget land. Gilded Goose, 1-cast 0/2 Flying Bird. When it enters the battlefield, you create a food token, and then you can pay 1 green and 1 and tap it to create a food token, and then you can tap it and sacrifice a food token to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. Hellkite Igniter is a 7-cast 5/5 Flying Haste Dragon that you can pay 1 generic and 1 red as many times as you can pump into it to have it get +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So that could get out of hand really quickly if not left in check. Imprisoned in the Moon, one of the actual better cards for locking down an opponent's commander. It's a 3-cast R that says enchant creature, land, or a planeswalker. And the enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap to add a colorless and loses all other types and abilities. It's a really good way to lock down an opponent's commander because land sacrificing isn't all that high on most people's lists, so that's really, a good lockdown card. Inspiring Statuary is a 3-cast artifact that says non-artifact spells you cast have Improvise. And again, Improvise says that your artifacts can help cast those spells, and each artifact that you tap after you've done activating mana abilities pays for 1 generic of that. Master of Ethereum, I use this in Psi, actually. It's a 3-cast Star creature. It's a Vidalcan wizard. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts you control, and it is an Anthem effect for artifact creatures that gives them a buff of +1/+1. Masterful Replication is a 6-cast instant that you get to choose 1. You can either create two 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens, or you can choose target artifact you control, and each other artifact that you control becomes a copy of that artifact until end of turn. So if you have a bunch of treasure tokens out, and then you have one artifact creature out that is big and nasty, you can turn all those treasure tokens into that creature. Perplexing Test is a 5 to cast instant. You can choose to do either returning all creature tokens to their owner's hands, or return all non-token creatures to their owner's hand, which in this deck, that's the choice you would do. Rise and Shine is a 2 to cast sorcery. It says target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature, and you put 4+1/+1 counters on each creature that became a creature this way. And the reason why it's worded that way is because it has overload. So for 6, you can replace all instances of target with each. So each artifact you control will, for the overload cost, can become a 0/0 artifact creature, and you put 4+1/+1 counters on it. Saheeli's Artistry is a 6 to cast sorcery that you can choose to do one or both. You can create a token that's a copy of target artifact, and or you can create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Sharding Sphinx. I actually like this card a lot. This also goes in my side deck and into my Death by Thopter deck. This is actually a really good piece for those two styles of decks. It's a 6 to cast 4/4 Flying Sphinx that says, it's also an artifact creature, keep that in mind, that says whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying. It actually says whenever an artifact creature you control. It doesn't say you can only whenever one or more. So for each artifact creature that deals damage, this applies. So keep that in mind. Shimmer Dragon is a 6 to cast 5/6 flying dragon. It says as long as you control 4 or more artifacts, Shimmer Dragon gets hexproof, and then you can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to draw a card. I see the theme of this deck and where it's going. I like it. Skyclave Relic is a 3 to cast mana rock of sorts. It has kicker of 3 and indestructible, and says whenever it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you create 2 tokens that are copies of it, and it taps to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. Spell Swindle, 5 to cast instant, counter target spell, and create X treasure tokens where X is the spell's mana value. It's the poor man's mana drain. Spine of Ishsa is a 7 to cast artifact that when it enters the battlefield, you can destroy any target permanent, and then when Spine of Ishsa is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. So it's reusable if you can sacrifice your own artifacts. Temple of Abandon, another budget dual land of sorts. Same thing with the Temple of Epiphany and Temple of Mystery. Thopter Assembly. It's a 6 to cast 5/5 Thopter with flying that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return Thopter Assembly to its owner's hand and create 5 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Oh, another one of my favorite cards that also goes in Psy and Death by Thopter. Thopter Spy Network is a 4 to cast enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, you create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. There's that wording, one or more, so no matter how many artifact creatures that you hit an opponent with, it will only draw you one card. Now, one of the things about this is because this is in Commander, I do want to point this out. It says whenever one or more artifact creature tokens you control deal combat damage to a player. The second part of that line says that if you hit multiple players, you can draw a card off of that. So you can possibly draw, if in a pot of 4, up to 3 cards off of that. Tireless Tracker, another good card. This is a really good one. It's a 3 to cast 3/2 that has landfall, just like the other Tireless guy, and says whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you investigate. That is to create a clue token. And it says whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. Clue tokens are almost as good as drawing a card. They create artifacts that you sacrifice later to draw cards, so it's having a draw in your pocket kind of deal. This is a really good card. Vidalcan Humiliator is a 4 to cast 3/4. It's a Vidalcan wizard that has Metalcraft, and the Metalcraft is whenever Vidalcan Humiliator attacks, if you control 3 or more artifacts, creatures your opponents control lose all abilities and have a base power and toughness of 1/1 until end of turn. So I'm not sure if you saw that. Metalcraft means that an ability happens if you control 2 or more artifacts. That's what that means. That's a good card, actually. Vine Glimmer Snarl. It's another budget dual land. It comes into play untapped if you reveal an island or a forest from your hand when you play it. Workshop Elders is a 7 to cast 4/4 human artificer that says artifacts you control have flying, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have target non-creature artifact you control become a 0/0 artifact creature, and if you do, you put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. So it turns those treasure tokens or those clue tokens or the food tokens into basically 4/4 beasts. Whirler Rogue is a 4 to cast 2/2.
that when it enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 color stopper artifact creature tokens with flying. And then you can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to have target creature you control become unblockable until end of turn, which is nice. And I think the rest of it's going to be the basic lands. We got islands, mountains, forests, and then of course we've got the thick commander so that you don't lose it in your deck. So it's a little bit thicker than the other ones. That's what that's for. And then the tokens. We've got Thopter tokens. Let's see, treasure tokens, golem tokens, more Thopter tokens, because that's probably going to create a lot of Thopters. Food tokens, the feather token for that Phoenix. Servo tokens for Saheeli, replicated rings, gold tokens. So yeah, they've got it all covered. Clue tokens, blood tokens, and then gremlin tokens. Oh, and then there's the beast tokens.
And that, my fellow Spellslingers, is what was inside the Tinker Time March of the Machine Commander Precon. For some reason, I seem to vaguely remember a similar theme of making as many differently named tokens before, but for the life of me, I can't remember if this is true or if I'm just having deja vu. Regardless, I like the theory behind this deck. I did mention at the beginning of this video that I like token-based themes, and that's exactly what this is. It looks like a lot of fun, but like all Wizards of the Coast precons, it can use a couple of upgrades. Luckily, I do an upgrade guide for each official precon the day after I unbox it, so please be sure to join me tomorrow for that. That's all for now, so please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, and also visit our sponsor at www.arcane-fortress.com, and remember to use discount code BLUEBEAR for an additional 5% off your order if you decide to purchase anything from them. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.